So, Guardians of the Galaxy was written and directed by James Gunn, and it stars Chris Pratt, Zoe Saldana, Dave Bautista, Vin Diesel, Bradley Cooper, Karen Gillan, Glenn Close, John C. Reilly, Benicio del Toro, Lee Pace. Whole bunch of people just appear in this movie, and it's about an intergalactic group of criminals who have a common enemy, and they decide to team up to take this person down once and for all. So I remember this movie was kind of a big deal back when it came out in 2014. It was a massive hit. Nobody saw Nobody saw it coming. Nobody saw like how big it was going to be. I think it was like the biggest Marvel movie at that time, or biggest Marvel movie of the year at least. I think Winter Soldier came out at the same time. I don't remember. But this was like a weird one because like nobody had heard of these characters. Nobody knew these actors. Like how could this movie just appear in this universe and just kind of just take this world by storm? Well, I remember watching it back then, and I remember enjoying it and rewatching it now in preparation for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. I still really enjoyed this movie. I thought it was a lot of fun. It didn't take itself too seriously, and I do think it's mainly because of the cast of this movie. So, what works in this movie? Well, the cast of the movie is pretty good. Like, Chris Pratt, I really liked him in this movie. He became a star right after this movie, and I can definitely see why. He was, like, kind of an Indiana Jones, Han Solo type, which I remember he was courted for, like, an Indiana Jones role at some point, like, as Indiana Jones, and I'm like, okay, you were good in Guardians of the Galaxy, but you weren't that good. Like, he's charismatic, he's funny, he's like quick on his feet. He's really good in this movie. Zoe Saldana, I thought, was also pretty good in this movie. Like, her action was just fine. Dave Bautista was decent. Lee Pace, I thought, was actually a decent villain. A lot of people criticize Ronan the Accuser in Guardians of the Galaxy as being a lackluster villain. Yeah, I kind of see him as, like, Corey Stoll from Ant-Man, where he may have been, like, a weak villain in terms of, like, what his ambitions were, but he had a lot of fun with the performance, and honestly, rewatching it over and over again, I still can't recognize that is him. He's a really good actor. I remember really liking him in Pushing Daisies, and I feel bad that he hasn't really gotten much of a career. The other actors do a good job. Bradley Cooper is surprisingly funny as Rocket Raccoon. Vin Diesel, he didn't do much for me. Maybe it's because he only had 3 words to say at once. It just didn't do much. But the chemistry between the main characters is really good as well, and I think that's kind of what made this movie great. Their jokes worked. Their banter was really funny. I also really dug the soundtrack for this movie. This was one of the better soundtracks in a movie in a while. Like, it actually made me go back and look up all these songs afterwards. And admittedly, I go back and listen to Fooled Around and Fell in Love a lot. That is a really great song. As far as, like, the visuals in this movie, the visuals are really good. I would say better than most of Marvel movies at the time. And I do think it's not necessarily like the CGI that works, but it's also the makeup that's also really good. Like, there were so many, people that were just made up in, like, different types of, like, makeup and such. And I honestly couldn't recognize most of the people. Like, Karen Gillan, I couldn't recognize her. Lee Pace, I couldn't recognize him. Zoe Saldana, Dave Bautista, Michael Rooker. It's kind of hard to, like, actually, like, they actually do a really good job with the makeup throughout this movie, and I really liked it. And overall, there's a lot of really fun, creative sequences. Like, the jail breakout when they're all, like, teaming up for the first time. That was really fun. Like, the whole joke about Rocket needing that guy's arm. That was funny. No, it was a leg that he needed. Like, a fake leg is, like, that was a really funny joke, even though it kind of went nowhere. There's a lot of fun creative sequences. Like, when they're all, like, holding onto that orb at the end. That was pretty cool. It's just a really fun movie overall. And admittedly, it is really funny. Funnier than most Marvel movies. And I think a lot of the jokes do work in this movie. The jokes in Guardians of the Galaxy 2, which I'll talk about very soon, is, I don't like the jokes as much because I think it's, like, pushing the envelope just a little bit. But I do think this is, like, fun enough to be like, this is fun for all ages, like, how it should be. Is there anything about this movie I don't really care for? Well, there are kind of a few lackluster characters. Karen Gillan, I didn't really like her in this movie as Nebula. I felt like she didn't get to do too much. It wasn't until Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, Infinity War, and Endgame where it's like Nebula kind of slowly became one of my favorite characters in the MCU, and I'm really excited to see what they do with her in the next movie. Glenn Close, I was also kind of disappointed in. I felt like she didn't really get to do much. It's like, oh, you got Glenn Close to star in this big movie. What's she gonna do? Mostly be on the sidelines. Okay, well, that was kind of disappointing. John C. Reilly and Benicio del Toro appear. They have a couple funny moments, but it's not really about them. It's mostly about the Guardians of the Galaxy themselves. So I can't really complain too much that they're not in the movie so much because, it's not about them. But overall, I do think Guardians of the Galaxy is a lot of fun. I do think the chemistry is great. The cast is pretty good for the most part. The soundtrack's a lot of fun. The visuals and makeup are pretty good. The action sequences are fun. And it's also just a funny movie overall. Like, I think it's mostly more of a comedy than it is like a superhero movie. And I think for a movie like this, it works. And even though I don't really care for some of the characters in this movie, particularly some of the supporting characters, this is still a really fun movie. I'll give Guardians of the Galaxy 3 out of 4 stars. See it. So, who's your favorite character in Guardians of the Galaxy? Comment down below, subscribe to the channel. This is Pat. Stay safe.